Hello, AP World History students. Mrs. Mathers here, coming to talk to you about Buddhism. This is one of the major religious systems that we'll be looking at in this course. And I decided to put this image on the opening page of this screencast because when I went to China in 2013, a lot of people asked me, what was the most surprising thing to you about China? And I had to say it was the prevalence of seeing golden Buddhas. They were everywhere. Some places we were forbidden to take pictures. There was a temple that we went to where there were like 1,000 Buddhas in one room. This particular Buddha is from a place we went to called the Temple of Heaven, which is a really cool old area of Beijing that was dedicated to praying for good harvests. And that was what this particular Buddha represented. So look it up online if you're interested in seeing what it looks like. It was really a phenomenal, beautiful place to visit. Interestingly, though, as prevalent as the Buddhist monasteries were in China, and by the way, they were closed within most of them within the last 100 years, and they're now just places to visit. They're tourist sites. Buddhism actually started in what we now know as India. So there's this very wealthy prince, very wealthy. His name was Siddhartha Gautama, and he lived from approximately 563 to 483 BCE. Now, his father was he really wanted to protect Siddhartha from seeing the bad things that can happen in the world. But he went out into the world and he saw four things. He saw an old man, a sick man, a dead man, and a monk. And he asked his friend in the story about Buddhism, about Siddhartha, he asks his friend, tell me what these four things are. I don't understand what they are. And finally, the one said, well, the old man, everyone gets old. The sick man, well, everyone gets sick. The dead man, everyone's going to die. But the monk is one who lives at peace. And so his wife was actually pregnant when he went to sit under the Bodhi tree for, I don't know, I think it was 49 days. And he came up with, or he became what's called enlightened. So he meditated under what's now known as the Bodhi tree, and he came up with the tenets of Buddhism, which I'm going to go over today. He also practiced extreme asceticism. That means he deprived himself of earthly pleasures. He teaches this new doctrine. It becomes really attractive. And in India, we have the caste system. We have Hinduism that really, sorts people into these levels in society. But Buddhism doesn't have that. And they actually developed these monastic communities where followers, strict followers of Buddhism, would go and they would not only live in the community, but they would serve the community as well. So what is Buddhist doctrine? This is a famous image of Siddhartha sitting under the Bodhi tree. So he came up with something called the Four Noble Truths. First one, all life is suffering. I think some people in the English translation misunderstand that a little bit. Having talked to some people who are practitioners of Buddhist doctrine, they say maybe it should be like all life is striving. All life is trying to find meaning and getting frustrated. And that I think is the point here. It's we're always striving. We're always trying to get something. And in the end, we're going to be disappointed because we're probably not going to get what we want. And so he said suffering then is caused by selfish desires. Or if you replace that with striving, striving is caused by selfish desires. Why do I want more money? Because I want to buy more things. Why do I want a higher status in my social group? Because I think it will bring me benefits. So he's like, yeah, these selfish desires, these are the things that cause you suffering. And you know what? If you can stop suffering by just stopping the selfish desires, just stop thinking about those things. But that's a pretty hard thing to do. So how can you do it? You can do it by following the Eightfold Path. Now, I'll go over the Eightfold Path a little bit more on the next slide. I have a few more things on this slide, and then we'll talk about the Eightfold Path. But keep in mind, these are the Four Noble Truths. All life is suffering. Um, Suffering is caused by selfish desires. We can stop suffering by stopping selfish desires, and we can stop selfish desires by following the Eightfold Path. So these are the Eightfold Path. You have right view, thought, speech, action, livelihood, effort, attentiveness, and concentration. And I have a picture, it's in the shape of a wheel on the next slide. The goal ultimately of Buddhism is to escape reincarnation. So, somewhat borrowing from the ideas of Hinduism, the idea here is that when your physical body passes away, you will be reincarnated into another human form. When you have achieved this eightfold path and you have escaped these desires, you will attain something called nirvana. And nirvana is a state of eternal peace. So that's the goal, is that you keep working through these multiple lives that you have until you can reach nirvana. Dharma is a word that we use to describe one who follows Buddhist teachings. They're following the Dharma that is expected of them. Here's a picture of the wheel, and the wheel has this eightfold path, so you can take a look at this, and I would take note of the eightfold path. So why does Buddhism appeal to people? Why does it spread? First of all, in Buddhism, which, like I said, started in India, there is no caste system. For many people, this is an attractive position, because if they are in a lower caste, they might feel as though their opportunities are limited by the caste, and they don't have to worry about, are they going to be reincarnated in a higher caste or a lower caste. The other thing that happened in Buddhism is the use of a vernacular or a common language in order to describe the tenets of Buddhism. Buddhism also called for moderation in life. So you can, enjoy some things, but again, do things in moderation. Now, this is an image of Ashoka. Ashoka was a Mauryan king, and we're not going to talk about the dynasties so much, but I do want to mention him a little bit. He was brutal. He loved the sword. He was determined to take over the town of Kalinga. Kalinga was a trading town. And after the Battle of Kalinga, some 100,000 people died. And the way the story goes is that Ashoka looked over the battlefield and he saw the blood and the death of 100,000 people. And he said, "This is too violent. I don't. This is wrong." And he decided to convert to Buddhism. He actually became a vegetarian. While vegetarianism is not required in Buddhism, for him, he did not want to kill any human or animals, so he became a vegetarian. He supported Buddhist institutions, and he supported missionaries, and he even spread the ideas of Buddhism through what are called rock and pillar edicts. So either on very large rocks or on really tall pillars, the tenets of Buddhism were spelled out for the people who would go on perhaps a pilgrimage or who lived in the area. The appeal of Buddhism is going to spread through trade. Many traders who are coming from China and Southeast Asia, across India, some of them through the Silk Roads, some of them through other trade routes. They, you think about it, they sit around the fire at night and they hear about this path to salvation, to nirvana, called Buddhism. And so Buddhism becomes very, very popular. And that's the other thing that I saw in China, where the Buddhist edicts were painted on tiles in many areas across China. Originally, the Buddha was not believed, in other words, Siddhartha was not to be but divine, as in aligned with the gods, but this thought did evolve in some areas. There are two sects of Buddhism. The first and the stricter one was Hinayana or Theravada Buddhism. The most important one for you to know about is Mahayana Buddhism. This was called the Greater Vehicle, and this was open to more people, and I talk about this on the next slide. This was open to more people, even wealthy people who could make donations to merit salvation. It is the biggest branch of Buddhism. So like it says here, the Buddhas never had a divine status, but there was a class of people called the Bodhisattvas. Bodhisattvas were people who had attained they could go to nirvana, but so they had reached this spiritual perfection. But instead of going to nirvana, they would stay back and they would be reincarnated in human form to help others to achieve nirvana and to find their true spiritual calling. This picture here is ruins of one of the monasteries of Buddhism. It's called Nalanda. Nalanda is no longer a Buddhist monastery. In fact, sadly, many of the Buddhist monasteries were destroyed in both India and China, although China has a large number of them that are open for tourists, as I said. And a lot of Chinese people still do practice Buddhism, even though the monasteries themselves are closed. So that's it on Buddhism. That should cover what you need to know. And if you have any questions, as always, feel free to ask me, visit office hours, or email me. Have a great day. Thanks.